What if the most viral educational content from centuries ago wasn't on a screen but written by hand? What if students battled for copies of textbooks that cost more than a house? Get ready to uncover the ultimate knowledge bombs from the medieval period, specifically from the 5th to the 15th centuries. Number 8. Donatus's Ars Minor. This ancient text, crafted by Aelius Donatus in the 4th century, became a bedrock of basic schooling across Europe. Donatus, a Roman grammarian, composed this slim volume as an introduction to Latin grammar. It did not aim for exhaustive coverage, but rather provided a clear question and answer format for beginners. The Ars Minor, meaning smaller art, focused on the 8 parts of speech. Donatus structured the text with a direct query, then a precise answer. For example, it might ask, "How many parts of speech are there?" and answer, 8. Then it would list them: noun, pronoun, verb, adverb, participle, conjunction, preposition, interjection. The brevity and clarity of this structure made it supremely adaptable for young learners. Scribes copied the Ars Minor countless times throughout the medieval era. It appeared on various materials, from expensive parchment to more humble wooden tablets coated in wax. Children practiced their letters by tracing its words. Monks diligently copied it in scriptoria. University students, even those studying advanced subjects, sometimes revisited its fundamental rules to solidify their Latin skills. Copies often showed signs of heavy use, with smudges from countless fingers and tears from frequent handling. Margins filled with notes, sometimes simple corrections, sometimes additional examples from a teacher. The manuscript's compact size made it portable. A student could tuck a small codex containing the Ars Minor into a satchel. Teachers in cathedral schools and monastic institutions relied on it as a primary teaching tool. Influence stretched across centuries, remaining a staple of Latin education until long after the invention of printing. Even after printing, it was one of the first books to be mass-produced, a testament to its enduring demand. Scholars estimate thousands of copies were made before the print era. Surviving fragments, often discovered as binding waste in later books, suggest an even greater number were produced and subsequently lost or repurposed. The Ars Minor began with definitions. It defined what a noun was by its properties. A noun is a part of speech with a case, signifying a body or a thing. It then provided examples like Rome, river, table. The simplicity of these definitions helped students grasp complex concepts. The text moved systematically through each part of speech, providing paradigms for declensions and conjugations. For verbs, it explained moods, tenses, persons, and numbers. It detailed how verbs changed forms depending on their use in a sentence. Students would memorize these tables, often reciting them aloud as a group. The popularity of the Ars Minor meant that many localized versions or commentaries on it appeared. Teachers created their own expansions or simplified versions for specific audiences. Yet, the core structure and content remained remarkably consistent over hundreds of years. The text served as a foundational grammar throughout the Carolingian Renaissance, laying the groundwork for later intellectual flourishing. It taught not just the mechanics of Latin, but also a systematic way of thinking about language. Its presence in nearly every school curriculum meant generations of medieval Europeans, from humble clerks to powerful scholars, began their education with Donatus. The widespread distribution of Ars Minor manuscripts across diverse regions, from Ireland to Italy, confirms its status as an undisputed educational powerhouse. Many libraries across Europe still hold copies of this slim but mighty text, each a testament to its long journey through time. The survival of so many copies, despite the fragility of parchment and the ravages of time, speaks volumes about its continuous and widespread use. It wasn't just a book. It was a daily companion for those learning to read and write Latin, which was the language of scholarship, church, and law. Teachers would drill students on its contents, ensuring they could recite its rules flawlessly. This active engagement cemented its place in medieval pedagogy. The very act of copying the Ars Minor also served as a writing exercise, reinforcing the lessons within its pages. Young scribes honed their skills by copying these basic grammatical rules again and again. Some copies are quite small, designed for a single student's hand, while others are larger, perhaps for a teacher to use for public lessons. Consistency of its content across these varied forms shows a remarkable uniformity in early medieval education. This ancient guide, written by a Roman, became a staple for generations far removed from the Roman Empire, linking them directly to classical learning through its clear and simple method. Number 7. Isidore of Seville's Etymologiae. Picture a massive ancient encyclopedia written by a single person that became a core reference work for nearly 1,000 years. That's the Etymologiae, or Origines, by Isidore of Seville. Isidore, a Visigothic scholar and Archbishop of Seville, compiled this colossal work in the early 7th century. It was an attempt to gather and organize all human knowledge known at the time. Title Etymologia refers to Isidore's method of explaining words by tracing their origins or etymologies, believing that the meaning of a word revealed the nature of the thing it described. This approach served as a powerful mnemonic device for medieval scholars. The Etymologiae is truly enormous, typically spanning 20 books. It covers an astonishing range of subjects, from theology and the liberal arts to natural history, medicine, law, wars, games, and even household tools. Book 1 deals with grammar, Book the 2nd with rhetoric and dialectic, Book the 3rd with mathematics, astronomy, and music. Later books delve into geography, zoology, human anatomy, food, and clothing. It was an ambitious project, aiming to be a universal compendium of knowledge. Scribes painstakingly copied this multi-volume work, often dedicating years to its reproduction. The sheer size of the text meant that full copies were significant undertakings. Monasteries and cathedral schools considered the Etymologiae an indispensable part of their libraries. Scholars referenced it constantly. If you wanted to know about a specific animal, a type of stone, or the meaning of an old word, you would turn to Isidore. It served as a primary textbook for students in the liberal arts, especially for those studying the trivium, grammar, rhetoric, dialectic, and quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, music. Teachers often lectured directly from its pages, explaining its concepts and expanding on its definitions. Students would pore over its definitions, memorizing the explanations. The book's influence spread rapidly throughout Europe. Copies were found from Anglo-Saxon England to distant parts of the Iberian Peninsula and beyond. Historians estimate hundreds of full copies, and thousands of partial copies or excerpts existed throughout the medieval period. Its widespread distribution speaks to its perceived value as a central repository of information. Royal courts and wealthy patrons also commissioned copies, sometimes beautifully illuminated, touting the prestige associated with owning such a comprehensive work. The systematic organization, despite its vastness, made it relatively easy to navigate, allowing quick access to specific topics. Isidore provided a framework for understanding the world. Typical manuscript of the Etymologia might be written in a clear, Caroline minuscule script, making it legible. Parchment used for these large volumes was often of high quality, reflecting the importance placed on the text. The margins of many surviving copies are filled with glosses, notes from students or later scholars adding their own comments, corrections, or cross-references. These marginalia show the active engagement of generations of readers with Isidore's work. It was not a passive reference, it was a living text that constantly informed intellectual inquiry. Scholars would often cite Isidore as an authority, even centuries after his death, demonstrating the lasting respect for his compilation. It provided a common base of knowledge for diverse academic pursuits. The sheer breadth of subjects covered meant that almost anyone seeking information, regardless of their specific field of study, found something relevant within its pages. The Etymologiae essentially defined the medieval understanding of the world, serving as a lens through which later knowledge was processed. Its comprehensive nature made it a go-to resource for anyone seeking to understand the ancient world, natural phenomena, or the basics of any scholarly discipline. The book helped preserve fragments of classical learning that might otherwise have been lost. It was not always accurate by modern standards, but for its time it was an unparalleled achievement in knowledge, organization, and dissemination. The meticulous copying and extensive circulation of Isidore's great work across the European continent pursues its status as an undisputed bestseller in the intellectual realm of the Middle Ages. Its sheer presence in so many medieval libraries, from small monastic collections to large university holdings, speaks volumes about its importance as a fundamental educational resource. Number 6. Johannes de Sacrobosco's De Sphaera Mundi. If you wanted to understand the cosmos, the movements of the stars, or how the Earth fit into the universe during the medieval period, Johannes de Sacrobosco's De Sphaera Mundi was the go-to guide. Written around 1230 by John of Holywood, an English scholar who taught at the University of Paris, this short treatise on spherical astronomy became one of the most widely used textbooks for hundreds of years. It was so popular that it was still being used and printed centuries later. The De Sphaera Mundi, meaning on the sphere of the world, systematically introduced the basic principles of astronomy and cosmology. It explained the Earth as a sphere and discussed the concept of the celestial spheres, the orbits of the sun, moon, and planets, and the constellations. Sacrobosco drew upon the work of ancient Greek and Arab astronomers, particularly Ptolemy and Alfargani, making their complex ideas accessible to a wider audience. The text was divided into 4 chapters. The first described the celestial and terrestrial spheres. The second explained the circles on the celestial sphere. The third discussed the rising and setting of the sun and the variation in day length. The fourth covered the motions of the planets and the causes of eclipses. Students in medieval universities, especially those studying the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, would diligently copy Sacrobosco's text. Many copies featured intricate diagrams, often in color, illustrating the various spheres, circles, and astronomical phenomena. These diagrams were crucial for understanding the concepts. A well-drawn diagram could make a complex idea clear, showing the Earth at the center of the universe or the paths of the planets. Scribes took great care in reproducing these visual elements, which were often annotated by teachers or students with their own explanations. The widespread adoption of De Sphaera Mundi meant it was taught at nearly every major university in Europe. It formed the basis for astronomical education for centuries. Surviving manuscripts number in the hundreds, making it one of the most frequently copied scientific texts of the Middle Ages. Its concise and clear presentation made it an ideal teaching tool, allowing students to grasp foundational concepts before moving on to more advanced works. Commentaries on Sacrobosco's text became a genre in themselves, with scholars expanding on his ideas and adding their own observations. These commentaries often appeared in the margins of the original manuscript or in separate volumes, further solidifying its status as a central text. The impact of the sphaera mundi extended beyond the academic world. Sailors and navigators, though perhaps not reading the Latin original directly, relied on the principles it laid out. It shaped the general understanding of the cosmos for educated people throughout the medieval period. The book provided a common language for discussing the universe. Its discussions of the Earth's spherical shape and the astronomical calculations required for timekeeping and calendar creation were particularly relevant. For instance, the accurate determination of the date of Easter, a crucial annual event, depended on understanding lunar and solar cycles. Knowledge made accessible through texts like Sacrobosco's. Students would gather in lecture halls, often without individual copies, and a teacher would read from a shared manuscript of De Sphaera Mundi, explaining its concepts and drawing the diagrams on a board or in the air. Later students would create their own copies, sometimes collaborating to ensure accuracy. The meticulous work involved in creating a personal copy reinforced the learning process. The text's enduring popularity was due to its directness and accuracy for its time. It presented a coherent, authoritative view of the cosmos that was consistent with Aristotelian and Ptolemaic models, which dominated medieval thought. Copies of this book, often found with a chain attached to library desks, served as constant sources of astronomical knowledge. The simple elegance of Sacrobosco's writing, coupled with the critical importance of understanding the heavens for both religious observance and practical navigation, ensured De Sphaera Mundi remained a top educational manuscript. For centuries, its continued use even after Copernicus proposed a heliocentric model demonstrates how deeply ingrained its teachings were. Many copies are still preserved in major libraries, each a testament to its pivotal role in medieval scientific education and its vast reach across European intellectual centers. Number 5. Avicenna's Canon of Medicine. Imagine a medical encyclopedia so comprehensive and authoritative that it became the standard textbook for doctors and medical students for over 600 years, not just in its original language but also in numerous translations. That's the Canon of Medicine, or Al-Qanon fi al-Tib, written by the Persian polymath Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna. Composed around 1025, this monumental work systematically organized all medical knowledge from the ancient world, drawing from Greek, Roman, and earlier Arabic sources, and adding Avicenna's own observations and clinical experience. The Canon is a truly encyclopedic medical text, spanning 5 books. Book 1 covers general principles of medicine, including anatomy, physiology, and hygiene. Book 2 details materia medica, listing hundreds of medicinal substances and their properties. Book 3 focuses on diseases of specific organs and body parts, from head to toe. Book 4 discusses general diseases affecting the entire body, such as fevers and poisons. Book 5, the Formulary, provides compound remedies and prescriptions. Avicenna's approach was highly systematic and logical, making the vast amount of information manageable for students and practitioners. When translated into Latin in the 12th century by Gerard of Cremona, the Canon revolutionized Western European medicine. It quickly became the primary textbook for medical faculties at universities like Salerno, Montpellier, Bologna, and Paris. Students would spend years studying its intricate details. Scribes produced countless copies of the Latin translation, often in multi-volume sets. The copying process was meticulous, with careful attention paid to the accurate reproduction of medical terms and descriptions of symptoms and treatments. Sometimes, diagrams of anatomy or herbal remedies accompanied the text. Though these were less common than in some other scientific works, the impact of the Canon was immense. It provided a standardized framework for medical education and practice across Europe. Physicians across different regions shared a common understanding of disease and treatment, all derived from Avicenna's teachings. University lecturers would read aloud from the canon, explaining its concepts to their students, who would often make their own copies or extensive notes in the margins of their inherited or borrowed text. The detailed descriptions of diseases, their causes, symptoms, and prognoses, as well as the pharmacological information, made it an invaluable reference for any medical professional. It was not uncommon for a medical student to spend years simply trying to master the canon. Many surviving Latin manuscripts of the canon demonstrate its heavy use. Pages are worn. Margins are filled with glosses in various hands, showing generations of students engaging with the text. Some copies include short summary notes or mnemonic devices to aid memorization of complex sections. The sheer volume of material meant that mastering it was a life's work. The book codified the humoral theory of medicine, which posited that health resulted from a balance of 4 bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Avicenna detailed how imbalances in these humors led to illness, and how treatments aimed to restore balance. The canon remained a compulsory textbook in many universities until the 17th century, long after the advent of printing. Its systematic structure, comprehensive coverage, and detailed clinical observations made it remarkably enduring. While later medical advancements challenged some of its theories, its organizational prowess and the sheer volume of practical information it contained ensured its continued relevance. The meticulous preservation and copying of the canon by medieval scribes allowed this crucial medical knowledge to spread and persist across geographical and cultural boundaries. It became the authoritative voice in medicine, a guide for countless healers who sought to understand and alleviate suffering. The thousands of surviving manuscripts, both complete and fragmentary, housed in libraries worldwide, stand as a testament to its unparalleled status as a medieval medical bestseller, a true pillar of health education. Number 4. Euclid's Elements. When we talk about the foundations of mathematics, especially geometry, one name stands supreme: Euclid. His Elements, written in ancient Greece around 300 BCE, became the quintessential textbook for geometry throughout the medieval period and beyond. Although not a medieval creation, its translation into Latin and widespread circulation in manuscript form made it an absolute bestseller for education during the Middle Ages. It laid out geometric principles in a rigorous, logical, deductive system that influenced thinkers for 2 millennia. The Elements is traditionally divided into 13 books. The first 6 books cover plane geometry, dealing with concepts like lines, angles, triangles, circles, and polygons. Books 7, 8, and 9 explore number theory, including prime numbers and proportions. Book 10 deals with irrational numbers. Books 11, 12, and 13 focus on solid geometry, discussing cubes, pyramids, spheres, and other 3-dimensional shapes. Euclid presented his concepts as a series of definitions, postulates, axioms, and propositions, theorems, each built logically upon the previous ones. This systematic approach was revolutionary and became the standard for mathematical reasoning. The importance of Elements to medieval education cannot be overstated. It was a core text in the quadrivium, the higher division of the liberal arts, specifically for geometry and arithmetic. Students at universities across Europe, from Paris to Oxford to Bologna, would study Euclid's work intensely. They learned to prove theorems, understand geometric relationships, and develop their logical reasoning skills. The Latin translations, particularly the version attributed to Adelard of Bath in the 12th century, based on Arabic texts, brought Euclid back to the forefront of Western European scholarship after a period of limited access. Scribes dedicated significant effort to copying Elements manuscripts. These copies often featured carefully drawn geometric diagrams which were essential for following Euclid's proofs. The accuracy of these diagrams was paramount. A slight error in a line or an angle could confuse a student trying to understand a proposition. Many surviving manuscripts show evidence of students tracing these diagrams, trying to replicate them or adding their own small notes and symbols. The margins were often filled with glosses, not just explanations of terms, but sometimes alternative proofs or discussions of the implications of a theorem. The demand for elements was constant. It was considered the gold standard for intellectual rigor. Mastering Euclid's proofs was a sign of a sharp mind and a foundational step for anyone pursuing further studies in science, philosophy, or even theology, where logical argumentation was highly valued. Lecturers would meticulously go through each proposition, explaining the steps and guiding students through the deductive reasoning. Students would spend hours, sometimes days, trying to understand a single proof. The struggle was considered part of the learning process, honing their intellects. The widespread dissemination of Elements manuscripts meant that a common mathematical language and methodology developed across Europe. Scholars in different regions could communicate about geometry, using the same definitions and theorems. The logical structure of Elements also served as a model for constructing arguments in other fields, influencing scholastic methods. For example, the use of definitions, postulates, and rigorously derived propositions seen in theological or legal arguments sometimes echoed Euclid's approach. Its logical precision shaped the very way medieval scholars approached intellectual problems. The hundreds of surviving medieval manuscripts, often with accompanying commentaries or scholia, attest to its continuous use. The first printed editions of Elements in the late 15th century, demonstrating the accumulated demand for the text after centuries of scribal production. This venerable text, a product of ancient Greek genius, became an educational powerhouse in the Middle Ages, shaping mathematical and logical thought for generations of scholars and cementing its place as a truly timeless educational bestseller. Its influence persists even today, a silent guide in the foundations of geometry. Number 3. Justinian's Corpus Juris Civilis. Imagine a collection of legal texts so vast and influential that it effectively resurrected Roman law and formed the basis of civil law systems for centuries, shaping legal thought across an entire continent. That's the Corpus Juris Civilis, meaning body of civil law, commissioned by the Byzantine Emperor Justinian, the 1st in the 6th century. While created long before the medieval period, its rediscovery and intense study in medieval Europe, particularly from the 11th century onwards, made it an indispensable educational bestseller. Contained the distilled wisdom of Roman jurists compiled over many centuries. The Corpus Juris Civilis consists of several parts. The Digest, or Pandex, a massive compilation of excerpts from the writings of classical Roman jurists, organized by subject matter. It contained thousands of legal opinions and principles. The Institutes, a textbook for law students, providing a systematic introduction to Roman law. It was concise and structured, designed for easy learning. The Codex, a collection of imperial constitutions, laws enacted by emperors. The Novae Constitutions, or novels, new laws enacted by Justinian himself after the Codex was completed. The Digest was the most intellectually challenging and prestigious part for scholars. It was discovered in the West around the 11th century and immediately ignited a legal renaissance. Universities like Bologna, the first true university in Europe, were founded with the study of Roman law, especially the Digest at their core. Students, often from aristocratic or ambitious families, flocked to these institutions to master this complex body of law. They sought to apply its sophisticated principles to the burgeoning societies of medieval Europe. Scribes produced numerous copies of the Corpus Juris Civilis, particularly the Digest and Institutes. These were often large, beautifully written volumes, sometimes with elaborate initial letters. copying was an immense task, given the sheer volume of text. Law students and professors known as glossators and later commentators covered the margins of these manuscripts with their own notes, explanations, and cross-references. These marginalia, known as glosses, became an integral part of the legal text itself, often copied along with the main text in subsequent generations. A good copy of the digest would have a full apparatus of glosses surrounding the central text. University lectures on the Corpus Juris Civilis were rigorous. Professors would read a passage from the digest, then explain its meaning, discuss its implications, and debate its application. Students would furiously take notes, often struggling to keep up with the rapid-fire legal arguments. Mastering the corpus was essential for a career in law. Whether as a legal advisor, a judge, or a high-ranking church official, as canon law was also heavily influenced by Roman legal principles. The knowledge gained from these texts provided a framework for legal reasoning that was widely admired. The influence of Justinian's corpus spread from Italy across Europe, shaping the development of civil law in France, Germany, Spain, and many other regions. It introduced concepts like contracts, property rights, and legal procedures that were far more sophisticated than existing customary laws. Its systematic nature provided a model for legal thought and organization. The Institutes, being a student textbook, was especially popular for those beginning their legal studies. Its clear explanations of fundamental legal concepts provided a solid foundation. The widespread presence of Corpus Juris Civilis manuscripts in university towns and major legal centers confirms its status as an educational bestseller. The legal principles and methodology contained within its pages became deeply embedded in European legal culture. Its revival during the medieval period transformed legal education and practice, providing a powerful, rational framework for justice and governance that continued to evolve for centuries, making it a foundational text for countless aspiring lawyers and administrators. The detailed, often cramped notes filling the margins of surviving copies are a testament to the intense intellectual engagement it fostered among generations of students and scholars. Number 2. Gratian's Decretum. If Justinian's Corpus Juris Civilis was the backbone of civil law, then Gratian's Decretum was its counterpart for canon law, the legal system of the Catholic Church. Compiled by the monk Gratian, likely in Bologna around 1140, this monumental work, formerly titled Concordia Discordantium Canonum, Concordance of Discordant Canons, became the undisputed foundation for legal studies within the Church for centuries. It brought order to a vast and often contradictory body of ecclesiastical laws. Before Gratian canon law was a tangled mess of decrees from church councils, papal letters, biblical passages, patristic writings, and Roman law principles, often conflicting with each other. Gratian's genius lay in his systematic attempt to reconcile these disparate sources. He presented individual canons, then offered hypothetical cases, and finally applied dialectical reasoning to resolve apparent contradictions. He structured the Decretum into 3 main parts, the first dealing with the sources of law in ecclesiastical persons, the second with legal cases and procedures, and the third with sacraments and rites. The Decretum was a massive text, typically spanning hundreds of folios, large pages, in manuscript form. Its sheer size reflected the complexity of the legal system it sought to organize. It immediately became the core textbook for the study of canon law at universities across Europe, particularly at Bologna, the leading center for legal studies. Students flocked to study this text, as mastering canon law opened doors to powerful careers within the Church, as bishops, cardinals, or papal administrators, or as legal advisors to secular rulers. It was a rigorous and demanding course of study. Scribes produced a huge number of copies of Gratian's Decretum. These manuscripts were often large and beautifully illuminated, reflecting the prestige of legal studies. Copying process for such a dense text was a significant undertaking, requiring immense patience and skill. Just like the Corpus Juris Civilis, Copies of the Decretum were typically covered in glosses. These marginal notes, added by successive generations of scholars known as decretists, clarified passages, reconciled further contradictions, and cross-referenced with other legal texts. The glosses themselves became so voluminous that they were often copied alongside the main text, creating a layered and rich legal commentary. University lectures on the Decretum were central to the curriculum. Professors would read sections of the text, then engage in disputations with students debating legal interpretations and applications. Students would diligently take notes, often on wax tablets, before transferring them to parchment. Text's dialectical method of posing problems and offering solutions directly influenced scholasticism, the dominant intellectual method of the High Middle Ages. Taught students how to analyze complex arguments, identify contradictions, and construct coherent legal reasoning. The influence of the Decretum was pervasive. It provided a unified legal framework for the entire Catholic Church, standardizing legal procedures, marriage laws, and the administration of justice across diverse regions. It became the fundamental authority for ecclesiastical courts and church governance. Any significant legal ruling within the Church would invariably refer back to Gratian. The thousands of surviving manuscripts, from large, formal university copies to smaller, more personal study texts, confirm its unparalleled status as an educational bestseller. The sheer volume of this legal treatise, combined with its profound influence on ecclesiastical and even secular governance, cemented its position as a cornerstone of medieval higher education. Methodical approach to reconciling conflicting authorities, a technique that spread far beyond legal studies, shaped Gratian's enduring genius and the timeless appeal of his great legal compilation. Students would spend years immersed in its pages, mastering the intricacies of church law, a skill that guaranteed status and power in the medieval world. The meticulous preservation and widespread copying of Gratian's work meant that a coherent and accessible body of church law was available across Europe, shaping not just the lives of clerics, but also influencing many aspects of daily life for ordinary people. Number 1. Peter Lombard's Sentences. Imagine a theological textbook that was so widely adopted and debated that it became the standard for theological education for over 400 years, influencing generations of thinkers like Thomas Aquinas and Bonaventure. That's Peter Lombard's Libri Quatuor Sententiarum, or 4 books of sentences, completed around 1150. Peter Lombard, a Parisian theologian, compiled this work as a systematic collection of theological opinions from church fathers, biblical texts, and various authorities. He aimed to organize and reconcile these sentences or authoritative statements on every major theological topic. The Sentences is divided into 4 books, each addressing a major theme. Book 1 deals with God, the Trinity, and divine attributes. Book 2 focuses on creation, angels, humanity, and sin. Book 3 covers Christ, the Incarnation, redemption, and virtues. Book 4 addresses the sacraments, resurrection, and the last things. Within each book, Lombard presents a series of questions or problems, often posing conflicting statements from different authorities, then attempting to resolve the discrepancies using dialectical reasoning. This method of sic et non, yes and no, was highly influential, teaching students how to identify theological problems, analyze various arguments, and arrive at coherent conclusions. It did not just present doctrine, it taught a method of doing theology. The Sentences became the core textbook for every aspiring theologian at the burgeoning universities, especially at the University of Paris, the premier theological school in Europe. To earn a master's degree in theology, a student had to lecture on the Sentences, delivering a series of public lectures commenting on the text. This was a crucial rite of passage, a demonstration of intellectual mastery. Students spent years studying Lombard's work, often memorizing large portions of it. Scribes produced an astronomical number of copies of the sentences. It was arguably the most frequently copied non-biblical text in medieval universities. These manuscripts varied in size and presentation, from compact student copies designed for portability to large formal versions used for public lectures. Text structure, with its clear divisions and numbered distinctions, made it easy to reference and navigate. Many surviving copies are filled with layers of glosses and commentaries, not just in the margins, but often between the lines. These commentaries sometimes grew so extensive that they overshadowed the original text, becoming scholarly works in their own right. Master theologians like Aquinas and Bonaventure wrote their own full commentaries on the sentences, works that are still studied today. These commentaries show the intense, sustained intellectual engagement with Lombard's work. The influence of the sentences was profound and widespread. It provided a uniform theological curriculum across Europe, ensuring that scholars in different regions shared a common set of questions and a common framework for discussing Christian doctrine. It shaped the very method of scholastic theology, emphasizing logical inquiry, precise definitions, and systematic argumentation. Theological debates for centuries revolved around the questions posed by Lombard and the solutions he suggested. Its detailed exploration of topics like the nature of God, the freedom of the will, or the efficacy of the sacraments laid the groundwork for countless sermons, treatises, and philosophical discussions. The immense popularity and enduring relevance of the sentences are undeniable. It served as a common touchstone for intellectual discourse, a shared language for discussing the deepest mysteries of faith. The sheer volume of surviving manuscripts alongside the thousands of commentaries it inspired unequivocally confirms its status as the ultimate medieval educational bestseller. It was not just a book, it was an entire curriculum, a launching pad for generations of theological inquiry, profoundly shaping the intellectual landscape of the Middle Ages and beyond, a true monument to systematic thought and enduring religious education.